Hi, and welcome to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. My name is Bill Moore. I'm the founder of Food Truck Training Group on Facebook, co-owner with my beautiful wife, Melissa, of our own food truck. It's called Food Truck 101, and I'm the executive director of the National Street Food Vendors Association, which is a nonprofit dedicated to education, advocacy, and uplifting all food vendors. Today, I'm going to be talking about a question that gets asked pretty frequently in our Facebook group, and that is, what hardships or troubles do y'all face in the food truck industry? But before I get into answering that question, I want to remind you guys about the Food Truck Owners Expo that's in Orlando, Florida this year, November 12th and 13th. I'm going to be there giving 3 classes, one on writing a profitable menu, one on marketing in the off season, and then one more on why we as food truck owners need to learn to speak with a single voice so we can make positive changes in our industry. Again, that's in Orlando, Florida, November 12th and 13th. If you'd like to buy tickets, and I suggest you do it today, go to ftoexpo.com, place that order, and when you do, put in the code FTTG15 for a 15% discount. I want to thank Table Needs for sponsoring this episode of the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. Table Needs is a full-service POS system capable of handling your busy food truck cash, credit card, and reporting needs. Check out the link in the description for more information about Table Needs. Let's answer that very often asked question of what hardships do you face as a food truck owner? Typically, when that question gets asked, there is essentially a hand raiser ad. And what that means is you'll have somebody that has something to sell, whether it's a coaching program or being a consultant or whatever they are. They're asking that question to get people to chime in what hardships or troubles they face as a food truck owner, and then they'll privately message those people and say, hey, I've got the solution to whatever the problem is that you voluntarily told them about. So typically I don't let those in because I can research the profile and see that, oh, you're a pretend business coach or you're a consultant, and I don't even bother to let those in. But the most recent one I researched, and they don't appear to have anything to sell other than they're curious about how difficult the industry can be. So let's talk about some of the answers that were given, and then I'll give you the solutions to those problems. Many people responded with some version of how hot a food truck or a food trailer can get. And they do get very, very hot. And there's not a lot you can do about the external temperature, but there is a lot you can do about the internal temperature and then how you can handle those hot kitchen moments. So the first tip I got is to make sure that your food truck, food trailer, or even if it's a tent, is very well ventilated. What you're going to find is that the inside can get sometimes 20 to 30 degrees hotter than the outside is. So when you're at 70 degrees and it gets up to 100, that's not too bad. But when you're at 90 degrees and it gets up to 120, that becomes a problem. So you want to make sure you have good ventilation. That means that if you have any type of exhaust system, that you have a makeup air. What a makeup air is it puts air back into the trailer or the food truck to replace the air that's being sucked out by the hood system. Now what that does is it creates a little loop of air coming in, going out, coming in, going out, right in front of the hood system. But that allows the AC everywhere else to function the way it's supposed to. Now, you're going to have some issues that the AC is not going to be able to keep up on. Number one is most food trucks and food trailers are not well insulated. That's one of the reasons why the humidity gets to all your refrigeration, because you don't have the moisture barriers and the insulation to help keep that humidity out. So make sure you have good ventilation. Now, if you don't have a really good air conditioner, you can do some DIY things to help keep yourself cool. You can do what's referred to as a swamp cooler or an evaporative cooler. And what that is basically get a 5-gallon bucket. You're going to get some hosing or some copper tubing. You're going to put water and then ice in that bucket, and then take the tubing or the hose and run it around the front of a fan, and then you can zip tie it in a coil fashion. So basically you're creating a miniature AC. Plug in the fan and then have some type of pump that circulates that water, that cold water, through the tubing. And there you go. You have at least one area in your food truck or food trailer that is going to be nice and cool. And you can take a break and go stand in front of it for a couple seconds. Now, speaking of taking breaks, you want to make sure that you and your team stay hydrated and that you plan breaks, especially on those long days when you're going to be out doing long events. If you need 3 people to operate your food truck or food trailer, that's awesome. Hire a 4th one that's going to just be there to give breaks so that everybody can get off the food truck or the food trailer or out from underneath that tent, can walk around where they're not being exposed to that 115, 120 degree temperature, and they can drink something and sit down and relax for a few minutes. Have that incorporated into your daily plan on how you're going to survive. You have to do those kind of things, because I can tell you what's going to happen. If you don't do them, don't stay hydrated, and you don't keep yourself cooled off, someone is going to faint. And while it may make you busier when someone faints, when you call the ambulance and you have an ambulance sitting right in front of your food truck or food trailer, that is not a fun thing to have to experience, because now you're shorthanded and you're busy. So plan in those breaks, keep people hydrated, and give them the kind of drinks that make sense. Sodas don't help because the sugar makes you more thirsty. You want to use waters and things with electrolytes, like Gatorade, for instance. And there's a whole bunch of other alternatives out there. Stay hydrated. You got to make that a part of your plan. One of the other things that got mentioned is what a hardship is for food truck owners or food trailer owners. And this is something that I see all the time, and that is finding employees, staffing issues, not enough good help. People today don't want to work. Those exact same things have been being said since I started working in the 1970s. Back then, a restaurant manager hired a bunch of people and they worked, and the restaurant manager really didn't do much of anything other than run the business. They didn't participate on the line. They didn't cook. They didn't clean. They didn't really do much of anything in most restaurants. There were some that required the manager to be an active participant in the service of food, but the ones that I worked for initially did not. But they found over time that they couldn't hire enough people, so they started working the management into being a position somewhere. And this has been going on again since the 70s. Back then, we needed 20 people on a shift to be able to turn out a bunch of food, because we were significantly busier than we are today, even though the dollar amounts are higher today. But that's because back when I started working, our signature item was a 99-cent roast beef sandwich. The signature item today, that same roast beef sandwich, pretty sure I saw is selling for like $6 or $7.99. So we'd have to wait on 8 people back in the 70s to get to that $8.99 mark. Today, all you gotta do is wait on 1. So we'd need fewer staff to handle higher sales volume. But again, the problem is, where do we find even 1 employee? Here are 2 sources that get overlooked. And sadly, they're overlooked because of people don't think about them, or people have a built-in prejudice. One of those is young people. I have always hired young people. I like young people that have never worked anywhere, because they have no bad habits for me to try to break. All they got to do is smile and be friendly, and I can teach them everything else about my business. So I don't mind hiring young people. Now, you've got to understand that when you go to hire people and then you find out a week or 2 or 3 weeks later that they suck, that's not a reflection of them. That's a reflection of your ability to hire and your ability to train. So when you whine about turnover, well, I can't find good people, you're not training the ones you do find, and you're not filtering out the bad ones through a solid interview process. Most food truck owners that I know, their qualification to hire somebody is to hold a mirror up to their nose, and if they fog it, they hire them. Because they don't ask them any question about, tell me about your background. Tell me about the last job you had. What's a hard subject in school that you have to deal with? Tell me about a teacher you don't really like. Those kind of questions reveal personality traits. And then you can explore personality, and does it make sense to hire that personality in your business? And then it just becomes a matter of policy and enforcing policies. We don't allow cell phones on the truck. Somebody has a cell phone out, you remind them. We don't have cell phones out while we're on the clock. I'm not paying you to be on your phone, I'm paying you to work. Second time they pull it out, you get a little bit more serious. Most food truck owners don't do that because they're so thankful they have an employee that they're afraid to discipline them. People like boundaries. People, just like toddlers, will test those boundaries. And if you're a good parent, you teach your kids what those boundaries are and then reinforce those boundaries. Otherwise, you got a kid that's running out in the middle of traffic to play because you haven't reinforced with them, you can't go outside of the yard. That's a boundary. Hire people with intelligent questions, and if they don't answer the questions to your satisfaction, say, thank you so much for coming in. Here's a little discount card. I'm not going to hire you today, but please come back and check us out because we got some awesome food and I'd love to sell you some. And then send them on their merry way. If they're a good person or a smart person, they're going to ask you, well, how come you didn't hire me so I'll know the next time I go somewhere else what not to do? And then you can coach and teach them. That's fine. But you've got to have those standards as far as asking questions. And does it make sense for that person to be on your staff by the answers they give you? And then once they're on, you got to teach them, train them, and then reinforce your policies and procedures. Now, the other group of people that I mentioned, the second group that gets ignored, and this is one that I sadly have ignored up until I got into that group, and that's old people. I'm an old person. I turned 65 this year, actually about 2 weeks ago. 65 years old. So technically I should be retired. There's a whole bunch of retired people out there that would love to work a small part-time job and help somebody so that they feel valuable, so that they feel like they're contributing to society rather than sitting and wait to die. I live in a community of a bunch of retired people. We live in an RV park. We're on a lake. It's a beautiful lake, beautiful area to live in Florida. And we have probably 100 permanent residents around us that are all retired. And pretty much all of them at one point or another and said, hey, if y'all need help, I'd love to come help on the food truck. They want something to do and they want to feel like they're still contributing to society because, again, the choice is if they're not contributing in some positive way, they're just sitting waiting to die. The people that live into the 80s and 90s and 100s, they work. They do something worthwhile with their life so that they are looking forward to tomorrow. So look at those old people. There's a whole bunch of them out there that have restaurant experience, that have food experience, that might actually be able to teach you something. Or if nothing else, they have guest service or customer service experience to where they can run a register with minimal training and they can cook. There's no reason why if you only need 2 employees, you don't have 5 senior citizens working. They each work a couple hours a day. One might come in and do prep, another one comes in just to do the cashiering, and then one comes in to clean. You will find people with those skill sets that would love to work just a few hours a day. It doesn't change your profitability because whether you pay one person to work 10 hours, you pay 5 people to work 2 hours, it's still the same amount of labor. Doesn't change anything on your part. So explore those 2 groups of people, young people and old people. Now, we've got a whole bunch more answers for me to talk about. So later on this week, come back for part 2 of what are the hardships that folks face as a food truck owner and how to answer some of those hardships. Thank you so much for listening to the 10-Minute Food Truck Training Podcast. Please take a moment to follow our podcast, and if you really like what we do, then support us. There's links in the description to make that happen. Every little bit does help keep us going. Until next time, you guys have a profitable day.